discussion. The NGOs, non-governmental organizations, must be understood historically so that you can make meaning out of what is going on around the table here. If you're an American and you really think about NGOs, you have to understand how this society evolves. If you look at one of the classical texts with regard to American society, Tocqueville, the French, Democracy in America. America is a nation of joiners who like to join organizations. And that's one of the reasons why American people are different from the other Europeans. That's why we have philanthropy. It's a Greek word. And you find major Americans who invest heavily in terms of philanthropy. Rockefeller, Ford Foundation, McMahon. You can go on and go on. You have all of them, they give money. Most of the NGOs get their money from these organizations. There are 40,000 foundations around the country, minimally. Could be more than that. Now the NGOs have the relationship with givers. You join, and if you look at the history of this organization, you see how the religious groups enter the equation. The religious groups in the African context, if you go back to the 19th century in Freetown, you're from Sierra Leone, that's part of your narrative. At the end of slavery, those missionaries who came to Sierra Leone, they came with two concepts, the Bible and the plow. One is the roadway to heaven, the other one is to help you in agriculture. The NGOs now begin to have meaning here. So we help you spiritually in terms of developing literacy and be exposed to a knowledge that will take you forward. But then we give you the plow. The plow will help you use modern technology to develop your agriculture. Now the NGOs come to our area. The military becomes responsible. This is where anthropology and the Peace Corps come into play here. The Peace Corps became a very important instrument of America in terms of understanding other societies in Vietnam and Cambodia and everywhere else they go. In Somalia, she told you about Somalia. It's the relationship between those who are handling society and state. How do you build a bridge between society and state? This is where the NGO comes in. During the Cold War, in order for the Americans to fight the communists, we have to encourage NGOs. The so-called Arab Spring came out of that. Those people who are part of the Arab Spring came out of what? Those people who can negotiate between society and state. So you have this middle group who are not part of the society controlled by tribalism, clanism, and all the other things. These people are modernizing people. That's what they're doing now. Her situation is, she is part of the Sierra Leonean diaspora. You have all groups now have diaspora. The diasporan people, they are middleway between modernity and traditionality. She's not traditional Sierra Leonean. She's not fully American because she still has loyalties. So the Jews have always been in that situation. So you see the Chinese migration, Korean migration, Jamaican migration, they are caught in this. So the NGOs become very important. So when she talks about America, right now, in the American government, the Obama administration is trying to do precisely what she's saying. How do you negotiate democracy, development, and the military? You try to balance these three groups. So this is where her situation is very important in this situation. Most of the American kids who are growing up are encouraged to join Boy Scouts, Girls Guides. These are NGOs. Now you see, what is remarkable about what they're doing now is they have triple whammy at the same time. She wants to see development in Sierra Leone. She has the benefit of being in America where you have modernity. So she wants to transfer technology back to Sierra Leone. Now, this is where anthropology is very useful for them. My advice to the young ones, know the history of Sierra Leone very well and know the ethnography of all the groups in Sierra Leone. When you talk about bad control and all the things you're talking about there, know them before you help them. Then you will know how you're going to help people. Then you'll have technology transfer because you have it. You have your cell phone. You can now use your cell phone to have a larger number of people around the world. Did you see the Kony affair recently? It became viral. Everybody's talking about Kony. Now go to work and be successful as the Kony. You will have millions of dollars coming your way. But then you have to organize yourself intellectually. You must have the anthropology of childbirth in Sierra Leone. You are educated, you can write the papers. You see, this way you have bargaining chips. If you go and talk to AID people, if you talk to her, she can connect you. That's how you do it. This is why you are here. You have to have research tools. You are educated. You are between traditionality and modernity. So this is where the NGOs become young. Two other points I want to make so that we have dialogue here. The other point to be taken into account really is if you look at NGOs from an American point of view or from a Western point of view, you cannot understand the NGOs unless you look at the rise of NGO during the Cold War. And this is where economics come in. Because economics enter the whole equation of the NGOs. Because during the communist period, the communists were very one-party system. They have Comosol. They have the Communist Party youth, young people, girls people. So, and they have a whole different of conceptualizing relationship between human beings. You see, when she was speaking, she was trying to tell you the different categories of being. You have those people who are military. They are people from society who are recruited into a disciplined order, the army. You go to Nigeria, what did the Nigerians do? They have young people who are recruited to work with what? We don't have any Nigerians here.
You do.
You have, huh?
You do, but I wouldn't be able to answer that.
You don't know that you have in Nigeria, Youth Corps.
Oh, right.
They are recruited by the government.
I did my youth corps.
Oh, she's an example. She's an evidence of that. You see? So you see, you have to develop the narrative. How do you blend state and society? You see, in American society, you have groups that are part of society. They may be religious, part of society that are voluntary organizations that are secular. Then you have part of society that may be doing economic or cultural. In America, you have the 4-H club. Any of you know the 4-H club? It's a you organize the young people to be interested in agricultural. 4-H club. Go to Connecticut Avenue. You see, so the thing is this, for them, what they're doing as young people, they are pioneers in transferring humanitarianism, which is in her paper here. You now have embattlement of humanitarian. They can do it. They capture humanitarianism in the diaspora to develop Sierra Leone. So gradually, you will begin to have larger number of Sierra Leoneans who are now mindful through internet, YouTube. You can begin to educate many people that way. You know, you come back to her story. You can see her story is very useful. 3 ways for America. One is Americans have to have the social geography of where they go. If you don't have the social geography, this is where sociology, anthropology, psychology, history, economics all come together. In her case, how can we go abroad to other countries? How are we going to deal with the Al-Shabaab in Somalia? We have Black Hawk down. That is a good narrative about American involvement in a society. The Somali state collapsed. Somalia is a stateless society. But this society is stable. The NGO have, you are going to a zoo, there are no guardians. You have to know all the animals in the zoo. That's number one. Then the other thing that is very critical for you with regard to NGOs, if you are studying NGOs, you have to recognize that while studying NGOs, your anthropology, your sociology, your psychology, your history, and your economics. Wow! That he just gave you. How do you get money? Because what is the exchange rate? For $1, he is doing a lot of you for you. $15, how many leons? How much is the exchange rate? Did you see now?
400 and something.
You see? So your $15 means a lot of money for a lot of people. That's the economics of NGO. You have a way of ameliorating the condition of other people through your use of American dollar exchange for local currency. You see, so you become a very useful source of support. You are going to change the lives of a lot of people. So what they have to do is the arrival rate and the service rate are synchronized. That's their challenge. for you, your responsibility is how to change the psychology of the people so that they don't have negative attitude. Because the Peace Corps volunteer, you talk about the Peace Corps volunteer, you talk about State Department and the military. Now these are three different agencies. How do they negotiate with one another?
Mm-hmm.
You see, because you see, the State Department people are very much elitist. They go to the schools and they train, they take public administration, political science, and all this thing. They want to be diplomats. They have dual language. But if you are USAID, chances are you are likely to be disproportionately represented by many Peace Corps volunteers. They have a language advantage over these people. And especially when you know local languages where you're going. Most Peace Corps people, they have that advantage. Finally, what I would say to all of us here is that when you look at NGOs, take into account that you cannot understand the NGOs. If you go to Bangladesh, they have over 22,000 NGOs. You go to small Gambia, I was surprised. I went to a bookstore, they have 200 NGOs, could be more. And if you look at the number of NGOs around the world, you'll be surprised. Just do a case study of NGOs in different countries. I stop here. Thank you.
If I may say something before I forget, because age, does that to you. You forget things quickly. Very eloquently summarized, I think, and I thank you for your comments. As you were speaking, it brought to mind two additional points that are important to keep in mind. Firstly, you mentioned knowing the other people, being able to speak the language, etc., and what do you do about Al-Shabaab or whatever the terrorist threat or the cells may be. The idea from the military standpoint is certainly to go in and win over the trust, confidence, and allegiance of the local citizens so that they are far less likely to support terrorist cells that approach them for support and assistance. That's especially important in most of these countries where you have a large youth population who are disenfranchised and looking for something to do with all their energy. Somehow, civil affairs types of activities have to also consider embracing that youth element and winning them over along with their parents so that they become allied to the United States approach and policies and democratization rather than moving to the other side for terrorism, authoritarianism, etc.
Employment. Very good.
Yes, that's one point. Another point that I want to share, and I'll hand these out to you as well. You may have already studied this in your class, I don't know. But the point about the growth of NGOs from the US perspective is actually very poignant. By demonstration effect and by virtue of need, NGOs are developing mushrooming, phenomenal rates in other countries. But the issue there has to do with whether or not governments, and especially authoritarian governments, want to see the development, the evolution of NGOs and the impact that they have on society. So what I've handed out to you has to do with NGO law, and specific to many African countries, and I learned this when I was in Ethiopia particularly, governments do not like the work that NGOs do for the most part. They see the NGOs and their work in civil society as a threat to their authority and power. And so they do everything that they can to squash the evolution of indigenous NGOs. American NGOs, even with this very good example of a newly formed organization doing good abroad, have the opportunity to go in and influence and make a difference, one person at a time, one baby at a time, whereas a local NGO may take years before they can do the same thing because NGO law is so restrictive in the country that the NGO can't even establish itself, cannot accept funds, cannot raise funds. That's something significant that everyone needs to keep in mind as well. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, well, very good. I know, you see, you have one of your neighbor from Sierra Leone there, see, very much into orphans. That's a very
We're going to start the conversation with her, but before we open it for the audience, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation of the eloquent presenters, and of course, Dr. Niang, who has this gift of making complex issues interesting and lively. Let me tell you why I thought having an occasion like this was important. We're always dealing with textbooks ideas. And it's good what Dr. Niang and I always talk about, the value of the town-gown model, where we deal with the world of ideas in the abstract with textbooks. It's also good to have the world of action, of involvement in the world, coming together and exchange what this means for both of us. And that's what has been done in a very eloquent way here. Starting with the theme, Ms. Bekele started about what Dr. Niang called the history of the relationship between the state and civil society. Sometimes people think civil society is only unique to the West. It was developed here in modern ways, but it has been part of all human societies, wherever there is autonomy of human agency. When you respect, whether it is in Muslim nations, in Christian nations, Hindu nations, the idea that individuals could believe what they believed in, that they had this private part where the government couldn't tell them, where it couldn't. That's the part of civil society, that's the base of NGOs. And this was brought clearly at 9/11, as you pointed out. Before 9/11, if some of you, the older ones at least like us, remember when Bush was running for president, he was asked what he thought of Africa. And he said Africa is not in the national interest of the United States. When he came to office, luckily, he learned, in fact, his era was, his period was one of those times when the United States spent the highest proportion of aid for Africa. Because 9/11 told him, when they were coming to office, Condoleezza Rice was in charge of the foreign. And I remember her saying they were more interested in protecting America from missiles because, and you know how they say sometimes poor people know and but nobody listens to them. I was one of those few people, including Niang and many of us, who said, no, the threat is from so-called non-actors, the so-called terrorists or insurgents, you know, that will come. Because in '93, the building, the Empire State Building, there was that bombing. And I even said after at Harvard that the threat will come from. And sure enough, this was in August, we had said. In September it happened. So they know that the billions of dollars you spend is not going to give protection. Then came the idea of human security, where human security is not only about building bombs, but being involved in everyday lives, building communities, building. So you have that element where the idea of the state, civil society, and institutions like us, or you as individuals, can play the parts, you know, where the young man over there spoke of his experience in the military. And rightly so, some who have radical ideas, see the military as not as wholly positive force, but you can't discount the fact that before, that's what happened in Iraq, before you have democracy institutions, and that's the part where Rumsfeld and his group failed, you have to have security. And Germany and Japan were built only after the institutions of security were built. So whatever reservations you might have, that there should be a role where the state and civic societies come together is important. So coming to what Agnes was saying, I will be among, like Keith, among those that some of the young people would never believe. Guess where I was born?
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, but where?
At the
In the
house.
hospital? Huh?
No, in the house.
In the house. Yeah. Well, everybody I knew, they were born. Do you think we had doctors delivering us? No. But the interesting thing is that there is also, particularly as African Studies Department, there is this knowledge that the midwives, before they were given midwives, had knowledge of thousands of years of experience in delivering. Should that be changed? Yes, of course. Could they learn from modernity about anesthetics and all that? That's important, that's where it comes in. But we also know that we have to include that, incorporate it in terms of how we build the institutions of the NGOs. And speaking of how you were saying the people were reluctant to go to the hospital, I remember reading statistics in Hungary. The guy who came up with big statistics was all the women were saying the illnesses of the children were caused by the doctors. They call themselves old wives' tale. When they get the doctors with their unwashed hands were causing all the deaths. And so if you don't have that sanitation, the so-called traditional deliverers, they had good knowledge too, so we could find ways of combining the modern and the traditional, the Western ideas with. So I don't want to take too much time. We'll have, I see in Hansan, we'll have 3 or 4 pause comments or questions, and then we'll have pause to whoever you want it directed. But I want to, since she was, she had her knowledge after we have put this thing, but she has an NGO. So we'll give her a couple of minutes to share from her perspective, both from her organization and what you've heard, and then we'll go around the others also, and then we'll have the response.
Okay, thank you. I'll make this short and sweet. My name is Alima Palmer, and I'm the founder and current director of Heritage Multicultural Programs and Services. Basically, I was a student here at Howard University, undergrad, and I'm intending to come back. The whole project started when war started breaking in different parts of Africa, Liberia, Sierra Leone. And as a young woman, I came to this country at the age of 17. I wanted to do something. So I started with the kids that were coming here from Liberia. I had summer programs, a lot of activities, just engaging the community. My background is clinical psychology. Some of the young ladies who are studying here, my guide, I am very proud to say, came through my organization. And in light of everything that have been said, what I want to throw in is, as somebody from Africa in my brain, and somebody intending to go back to Africa, even though Dr. Nyang keeps telling me is to be realistic, but I still want to go back to Africa. In terms of dealing with NGOs, my thought is this. First, we have to think of what is the real need, role, concept of NGOs as it pertains to Africa at this point. In dealing with Africa per se, we have to take certain things into consideration. One, as Dr. Nyang articulated, we have to think about the people, the Africans. Okay, what is the need for an NGO in Africa at this time? Okay, the whole idea, the whole need is to help revitalize, resuscitate, and move Africa to become effective global partner. Okay, so in that light, when this, Agnes speaks of what they are intending to do, my thought is not that simply limited to having babies. It's what they are confronted with. First of all, there are structural issues. Like Sierra Leone, for example, Sierra Leone has been through a brutal war, civil war for the last 10 years. So it's not simply a matter of having babies, babies being delivered. My mother was a midwife. I was also delivered at home. But it's dealing with the relics of war, where in the past, you had water, proper hygiene, proper sanitation in the home to be able to deliver the kids. Now, even in the city, I also went to Sierra Leone last year. We're doing the orphanage, as Dr. Nyang said. The government asked us to not just limit it to the orphanage, but to even extend our projects to include a youth empowerment center. Okay, even though the government, we had dialogues and everything, they came up and said, can you do it? Okay, since last April, we're still waiting for documentation to acquire land. I had land, I was going to do it on my own. They said, come and do it. We shipped vehicles to Sierra Leone. We still haven't gotten the vehicles. So there are logistic issues, okay, in terms of working. Also, we have to think of foreign entities. Example of what we've had today, what is the real interest or meaning of some of these funding or interest that we are interacting with. Some of them are really wanting to do well in Africa, but because of lack of knowledge, because of lack of information, not just from the foreign entity, but even from the indigenous people, it becomes a challenge. Okay. For example, when we talk about FGM, okay, all over the news, everywhere in the world, we hear of FGM and the brutality of mutilation. But if you get to know what FGM is all about, it's more of it's very structured. Right now, I'm advocating that becomes a program, like a summer program for the youth, where women are taught, social skill, parenting skill, arts and crafts, and everything else. So the mutilation part is just one segment. I am advocating that we get rid of it, but it is an institution that needs to be maintained. So when a foreign entity comes in and say, get rid of it, I challenge it. What are we getting rid of? And so it's dealing, creating that, well, not just a point of contention, but rapport, understanding in terms of what is needed, what is being done, and what must continue. Another area is what Dr. Nyang said, dealing with the local government as well as local communities. I don't want to take off the whole time, but I'm just going to highlight some of this thing. Some of what my thoughts were just listening. A big piece of dealing with NGOs right now, a lot of us mean well, we go in and we want to do work, but we're challenged by lack of networking. Networking should be a big part. For example, you said you guys are working in Bo. There is an orphanage project in Bo that was started maybe about 5-6 years. The people who started it were from here. They went in, didn't know what they were doing, started orphanage project from a small, maybe they had about 5-6. Right now they have over 100 kids. But it's very structured right now. They've built a hospital, it's called Massey Hospital. So that could be a point of connecting and working together. So networking is very, very relevant. Another piece that we are challenged by is lack of continuity. Because we are not networking, because we are not working collaboratively, we go in, we start, we do not understand the structures, the system, we get frustrated and we drop it. So all of those are things that we need to think about. And again, as I said, relics of war, being specific as to what we want to do and what we want to accomplish in terms of NGOs. So I'm not going to take up the whole time, I just wanted to share and go from there.
Thank you. We'll have you, 3, 4. Okay.
Okay. Yeah,
So I completely understand what you're saying about post-conflict societies, because being from northern Uganda, I took complete offense to the CON 2012. I hated it. Because I just came back from 2012, sorry. Came back from Lira in December. And Invisible Children have been there for such a long time and they've been pumping all this stuff. I actually went to the office because I was so curious. And I went back home in 2007, nothing changed. Nothing has changed from what I've seen. So when I see international agencies or whatever, NGOs particularly going into these type of situations where they don't understand the complexities of the issue. Because these are not issues that just sprung out of LRA and Joseph Kony and whatever. This is prior to 1962 to independence. This is pre-colonial Uganda. These are issues that have been fermented for years, that situate like NGOs like Invisible Children, when they put something out there like that, as a Ugandan, I'm scared, and it disheartens me because I haven't seen the video because I refuse to see it, but it disheartens me when you don't explain the real issues. You don't explain who are the actors, what are the factors, what are the elements, what's going on in the North. And I was reading an article not too long, it was like yesterday actually, and, and it was in The Observer, and barely any northern Ugandans have seen the video. And so they did a screening. I don't think it was in the Gulu region, but I think it was in Lira actually. And the local people were outraged. They were upset. They were like, why would they show such a video without, consulting me, the person who's going through it, And so when and seeing Invisible Children work through these systems, work is being done, don't get it wrong, but I think it's misrepresented, and NGOs, international NGOs in Africa, when they come in, like, you're right, you need to know your terrain, you need to know what you're dealing with, because you're going to have situations where there's policy and practice, and there's no marriage between the two, and then effectiveness, how do you scale effectiveness? So, that's my comment.
Yeah, my question, I appreciate what my sister from Sierra Leone has said, and also what Dr. Nyang has said, but my question, I guess, to everyone in the room is, our answer more NGOs? Because I feel like for every person who visits the African continent will come out with an idea saying, I'm gonna start a new NGO. It's gonna be, youth, college kids going on a mission trip in January. They're in one little small place. They come back and they're like, oh, I'm gonna get the women together, and because they can, be it because of white privilege, whatever it is, access to resource, they will start those NGOs. My mind is blown each time I run into a student. They're like, oh, I was in Rwanda last summer, and so I'm trying to get my NGO registered right now. And I'm like, do you understand the structures that the government is trying to work? Are you working against the government? Like, there's a lot of lack of understanding. So are we saying that the answer to Africa's development dilemma is more NGOs? And as Dr. Nyanyu said, that in the Gambia there's 200 NGOs, and I'm writing my thesis, and Gambia is just a strip of land. It's not even that big, right? And then I'm writing my thesis on maternal health, and Tanzania has 16,000 NGOs, 16,000. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, so that's his job, is dealing with NGOs. He barely has any other time to wiggle anything else. But if you look at the statistics for Tanzania, maternal mortality is still really high. So where is the disconnect between these plethora of NGOs whose objectives and statements are all similar, but we are not seeing tangible results on the other side?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to first of all say something about what Dr. Yang said about the NYSC. The NYSC is a National Youth Service Corps in Nigeria. It's a one-year compulsory program for all, it's compulsory for every graduate. If you have a first degree or an HND, that's if you go through college and you earn a diploma, you must serve for 1 year. It's like a kind of military, pre-military thing. You have to go on camp for about 6 weeks where you get military training, after which you'll be deployed for your primary assignments. Mostly, most of the students, you either teach, or for those who are like medical doctors, they work in hospitals and they are paid a little stipend. So it's like a form of cheap labor. Most private companies and banks, they like to take in youth corps members because they don't have to pay them much. They just give them a stipend because the government has an amount he pays. When I did mine 1987/88. I graduated June 87 and went into camp in September. And I was paid 200 naira. Then 200 naira is like 20,000 naira today. And that's about $150. That was how much they pay them now as their monthly allowance. Then, apart from that, I want to make a comment about what Ms. Agnes said. For those of us who had our children, our babies in Africa, when a woman is pregnant in Africa and you want to have your baby, it's a matter of life and death. If you go in, you put to bed, you come, when you are going, you'll be praying to God, God help me, God help me. That's how it is when you want to have your babies in Africa. But for me, I am lucky I had a good job, so my company paid for me to have my baby in a very expensive hospital. But not all the women have that privilege of going. You go to the government hospital, nothing works there. There's an essential thing that we lack in Africa: water. Water. We water used to be a basic necessity, something we used to have, but you find out that over the years, with development, water is no longer within the reach of an African woman. In those days, in the olden days, when you want to have a baby, the native midwives, they'll boil the water. They have a big cooking pot and the firewood, and the heat from boiling the water is soothing for the woman having the baby. And you find out that it is so hygienic when they use that hot water to do everything. And you find out that in those days, the children don't die as they are dying now. The children don't die. You look at those old midwives, you say maybe they are primitive. They are not. They had a lot of scientific methods they were using that over the years, wars, drought, a lot of things took away all of those things that they had. Now you go to the hospital, if you are going there, you have to carry your own water to the hospital. If you are sick, you have to take everything down to the hospital. You have to go there. So what I'm trying to say is that the water is very, very important. You have to do something about water. I think that water is more essential. Thank you.
Right now we have quick reaction from the panel, and then we'll have 3 or 4 from the audience, and you want to do this real quick now after the next round, or?
Oh, I don't know. I can go next round.
Quickly, and then we'll have them.
Who's there? 1 or 2?
Here we go.
I understand the role of NGOs and